Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless Official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Nick Newman had never imagined that his son Noah would be dragged into a conspiracy so dark, so deeply tangled in layers of betrayal, blackmail, and hidden agendas that it would not only shake the Newman family but also pull in the fragile legacy of the Chancellor line, merging both worlds into a combustible powder keg waiting for a spark. Yet as the late afternoon sun set over Genoa City and Nick slipped into his black SUV, his mind wasn't on the picturesque skyline or the fading warmth of October. It was locked on Noah, his son who had been missing for weeks, lured away by Cain Ashby's silent but manipulative schemes, promises of adventure masking a deadly intent that had almost cost Noah his life, and now, as Nick gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white, the fatherly determination burned within him like fire, for he had traced his son's location to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town where Cain's men were rumored to keep leverage on those who dared cross him. Moving like a shadow, Nick slipped past the chained gates, heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and fear, knowing every second counted, every creak of the metal door could mean Cain's goons had heard him, but there in the darkness, through a broken window where moonlight barely filtered in, he saw him, Noah, tied to a chair, head slumped forward but still breathing, alive, his son, his boy who had once played guitar for the underground and now found himself a pawn in a global game of money laundering, falsified Chancellor Industries contracts, and a secret file that Cain had buried for decades. Without hesitation, Nick crossed the room, cutting Noah loose, whispering urgently, "It's me, son, it's Dad, I've got you," and Noah stirred, eyes opening slowly, confusion giving way to relief as he rasped, "Dad, they said you'd never find me," but Nick pulled him into a fierce hug, refusing to let go, promising with his embrace that no one, not even Cain Ashby, would ever take his son away from him again, and with stealth and luck they slipped back into the night, making their way to the waiting SUV, where Nick already had passports, cash, and a single destination in mind, Nice, France, not for vacation, but because tucked away in a centuries-old villa overlooking the Mediterranean was a locked vault belonging to Catherine Chancellor herself, a vault that Jill had whispered about in moments of wine-soaked nostalgia and regret, a vault that held the infamous secret file Cain had fought so hard to conceal, a file that, if revealed, would expose every fraudulent deal, every forged signature, every crime that Cain had committed under the guise of protecting Catherine's empire, and most importantly, it would be admissible evidence strong enough to put Cain in jail for life. As the jet sliced through the night sky, Noah, still shaken and pale, listened as his father explained in hushed tones how Cain's empire wasn't built on loyalty or love but on lies, betrayals, and stolen documents, and though Noah's voice cracked when he asked, "Why me, Dad? Why did he drag me into this?" Nick answered with grim clarity, "Because you're a Newman, and he knows if he can control one of us, he can manipulate the rest." But Nick swore then and there, with every ounce of his being, that Cain would never win. Arriving in Nice at dawn, father and son felt the brisk sea air wash over them, but the weight of their mission pressed harder than ever, for Cain had eyes everywhere, and already whispers in the French Riviera suggested that someone knew Nick was coming for the vault, someone who had been paid handsomely to keep the file hidden. And as they entered the villa, an echoing marble hall with portraits of Catherine smiling down like a silent guardian, Noah marveled at the history around him while Nick's instinct screamed that danger was near, every step closer to the vault pulling them deeper into a labyrinth of trust and suspicion, until finally, with Catherine's old brass key retrieved years ago from Jill's jewelry box, Nick slid it into the lock, turning with a slow click that echoed like thunder through the empty halls, and as the door creaked open, dust rising like ghosts from the past, there it was, the secret file, bound in Catherine's handwriting, a leather folder embossed with Chancellor's crest, its edges frayed but its contents intact, documents that would not only dismantle Cain's fabricated empire but reveal shocking truths about his rise to power, including falsified records of adoption, shell companies funneling money offshore, and chillingly, names of accomplices inside Newman Enterprises who had looked the other way. Noah's hands trembled as he reached for the folder, whispering, "This is it, Dad, this is everything." But before they could celebrate, footsteps thundered behind them, Cain himself appearing in the doorway, eyes blazing, voice cold as steel as he sneered, "Did you really think you could outsmart me, Nick? Did you really think you could steal what belongs to me?" And the air grew thick with tension, father shielding son gripping the folder like a lifeline, and Nick stepping forward, his voice calm but firm, declaring, "It never belonged to you, Cain. It belongs to Catherine, and it's time the world knows the truth." And with those words, the war was no longer in whispers, it was out in the open, Nice becoming the battlefield where a father would protect his son, a son would learn the true meaning of legacy, and a villain would face the very file that held the key to his downfall. The confrontation stretched like an eternity, every exchange laced with rage and desperation, and though Cain lunged, trying to wrestle the file from Noah's hands, Nick fought with the raw strength of a father defending blood, fists connecting, echoes of struggle bouncing off marble walls, until finally, Cain lay subdued, breathing hard, fury in his eyes but powerless, while Nick and Noah, battered but unbroken, stood victorious with the file clutched tight, knowing this wasn't the end but merely the beginning of a trial that would shake Genoa City, tear apart alliances, and perhaps even drive wedges through the Newman family itself. Yet as Nick wrapped an arm protectively around Noah and whispered, "We're going home, son, and we're bringing this with us," both understood that justice wasn't just about putting Cain behind bars, it was about reclaiming the truth, healing old wounds, and proving that no matter how dark the path, family and legacy would always shine brighter than deceit. As the echo of Cain's defeat still vibrated through the stone halls of Catherine Chancellor's villa, Nick pulled Noah close, his arm protective and steady despite the bruises swelling on his knuckles, while the secret file weighed heavy in his son's trembling hands, a symbol not only of their victory that night but of the storm that awaited them the moment their plane touched down back home, for in Genoa City, whispers had already begun spreading like wildfire, rumors of a Newman plot, of Catherine's secrets dragged from the grave, of a betrayal so vast that Chancellor Industries, Newman Enterprises, and half the city's legacy families could be implicated. And Nick knew Cain's arrest wouldn't be the neat resolution he longed for, but the spark to ignite a dangerous inferno. Noah, pale but determined, muttered, "Dad. He won't let this go, he'll come after us, harder than before," and Nick, with that hard glint of his father Victor in his eyes, replied quietly, "That's why we have to move faster than him. We don't just have the truth, son, we have the proof, and Cain can't outrun that." But even as he said it, the floorboards creaked above them, reminding him that Cain wasn't alone in his pursuit, that men loyal to his cause lurked like shadows, watching, waiting to strike, and so Nick pressed the folder against Noah's chest, commanding him to hide it beneath his jacket as they slipped back into the pre-dawn streets of Nice, the sea air cold, the cobblestones slick beneath their feet as church bells chimed ominously in the distance, like a warning that time was running short. The flight back to the States was tense, cloaked in silence, every hour dragging under the weight of unspoken fears, with Noah stealing glances at the folder in his lap, afraid that even in the safety of the clouds Cain might somehow reach them, and Nick wrestling with the knowledge that once they landed, everything would change, not just for Cain, but for the Newmans, the Abbotts, the Chancellors, and even Jill, whose ties to Catherine's estate would inevitably be questioned when the secret file came to light. By the time they reached Genoa City, the storm had already gathered, media vans crowding Newman Towers, journalists demanding answers about Cain Ashby's rumored downfall, and Victor Newman himself waiting in the lobby like a dark sentinel, his expression unreadable, his eyes sharp as blades as he surveyed father and son, his booming voice filling the room with both pride and challenge. "Nicholas, you've brought back the file, haven't you?" Catherine's file, and Noah, who had never been more than a side player in the family's corporate wars, suddenly felt the weight of generations press upon him as Victor's gaze shifted to him, as if demanding to know whether his grandson had the strength to uphold the Newman legacy or whether he'd crumble under the scrutiny. Nick, standing tall but wary, handed the folder over to Michael Baldwin, who had been summoned to handle the legal storm, insisting that the documents be analyzed, authenticated, and filed with the court immediately, for Nick understood that hesitation meant Cain could twist the narrative, that delays meant danger, and though Victor approved with a nod, his sharp words to his son cut through the air. "This war you've started, Nicholas, will not end in a courtroom, it will end with blood, betrayal, and families torn apart. Are you prepared for that?" And Nick, jaw tight, answered with the simple conviction of a father who had nearly lost his son, I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to keep Noah safe, and to finally end Cain's reign of lies. Meanwhile, Cain was anything but idle. Though bruised and battered from his confrontation in Nice, his fury was a storm no prison could yet contain, and before the authorities could close in, he activated every last contact he had in his network, calling in favors from business associates, ex-lovers, and even rogue lawyers who owed him debts, spinning a tale that the secret file was nothing more than a forgery, an elaborate Newman plot to discredit him and steal Chancellor Industries from the rightful heir. With his Australian accent sharpened into a weapon, he gave interviews from the shadows, painting himself as a victim of the Newman machine, daring to utter Catherine's name as though he alone had honored her wishes, and in living rooms across Genoa City, some whispered doubts began to rise, for hadn't Victor himself manipulated documents in the past? Hadn't the Newmans rewritten history before to suit their empire? Cain's lies found sympathetic ears, and suddenly, the courtroom wasn't just a place of justice. It was a battlefield of perception, a theater where every word, every piece of evidence, would be scrutinized not just by the judge but by a city divided between Newman power and Chancellor loyalty. For Noah, the return home was no comfort at all. Though Nick kept him close, though Sharon tried to soothe his nerves with gentle words, he could not shake the nightmares, the memory of Cain's men holding him captive, the sound of his father's fists connecting in desperation, the image of Cain's blazing eyes in the villa's doorway, haunted him nightly, and when Mariah came to see him, her arms wrapping him in a sister's love, he admitted in a broken whisper, "I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again," but she, fierce as always, reminded him that being a Newman meant surviving storms, that his scars were proof not of weakness but of strength, and though her words warmed him, he knew his real strength would be tested when he had to take the stand, for Michael Baldwin had warned them that Cain's lawyers would try to discredit Noah, to paint him as a confused young man manipulated by his father, and Noah feared he might falter, that his voice might crack, that he might crumble under the scrutiny, but Nick, ever the protective father, swore to him that truth would carry them through, that courage wasn't about never being afraid, but about standing tall in the face of fear. The courtroom battle began like a spectacle, reporters flooding the steps, cameras flashing as if a celebrity trial had descended upon Genoa City. And inside the oak-paneled room, families divided themselves along invisible battle lines, Jill sitting rigidly in the back with tears brimming in her eyes, torn between loyalty to Cain, who had once been like a son to her, and her knowledge that Catherine had hidden that file for a reason, because she had known Cain's crimes ran deeper than anyone could imagine. Victor loomed in the gallery like a general overseeing a war, while Nikki, her diamonds glittering under the lights, whispered prayers that her family would not tear itself apart in the crossfire. When the judge called the court to order, Nick sat beside Noah, his hand gripping his son's shoulder, steady and reassuring, while Cain, dressed impeccably despite his swollen jaw, sat with his lawyers, his smirk daring the Newmans to try and break him. Michael Baldwin rose with practiced authority, laying the secret file upon the bench, his voice booming as he declared, "Your Honor, this is not speculation, this is not fabrication, this is the truth Catherine Chancellor herself sought to preserve, the truth that exposes a legacy of fraud, forgery, and financial crimes committed by Cain Ashby at the highest levels of Chancellor Industries," and the room erupted in gasps as documents were displayed on the projector, signatures mismatched, accounts traced, dates and names aligning like puzzle pieces that could no longer be denied. But Cain's defense was cunning, twisting every revelation into an accusation against the Newmans, his lawyer sneering, "Isn't it convenient that this so-called secret file was found not by impartial investigators, but by Nicholas Newman himself? Isn't it convenient that Catherine, who loved Cain like a son, is no longer alive to defend him? Isn't it convenient that the very family with the most to gain from Chancellor's fall now parades themselves as heroes of justice?" And for a moment, doubt flickered in the room, reporters scribbling headlines that hinted at conspiracy, while Jill buried her face in her hands, the weight of divided loyalties breaking her heart. Noah, trembling but resolute, took the stand, his voice unsteady at first as he described his kidnapping, Cain's threats, the night in Nice, but when he lifted his eyes and met his father's gaze, strength poured through him, and he declared with a steadiness that silenced even Cain's smirk, "I was there. I saw the file. I saw the lies. And I know what he did to me, to my family, to Catherine's name. Cain Ashby doesn't deserve our pity, he deserves prison. The judge's gavel struck to restore order, the room buzzing with whispers, but in that moment, Nick felt something deeper than victory. He felt pride in his son, pride that Noah had found his voice, his courage, and though the war wasn't over, though Cain's defense would stretch every legal loophole, he knew the tide had turned. In Nice, they had stolen the truth back from shadows, but in Genoa City, they were wielding it like a weapon, and no matter how loud Cain shouted, no matter how slick his lawyer's lies, the truth would cut through, because the secret file was more than evidence, it was Catherine's legacy, her final safeguard against corruption, and with Nick and Noah carrying it forward, Cain's empire of deceit stood on the brink of collapse. The silence that followed Noah's testimony lingered like a heavy shroud over the courtroom, broken only by the scratching of reporters' pens and the nervous shuffle of Cain's legal team, who had not anticipated the boy's sudden surge of strength. For the first time, the slick defense faltered, and Cain's smirk, so often his shield, his trademark weapon, twitched at the edges, revealing cracks of panic beneath the polished veneer. Yet he refused to crumble, refused to admit defeat, because in his mind, this wasn't the end of his story but simply another obstacle in the endless war he had waged against the Newmans, the Abbotts, and anyone else who dared doubt him. Nick sat straighter, relief flickering across his bruised features as he watched his son step down from the witness stand, Noah's hand still shaking but his chin lifted proudly, and Nick whispered, "You did it, son," squeezing his shoulder with the unspoken promise that whatever storms came next, they would weather them together. But Michael Baldwin, ever the realist, leaned across the table, his voice low and urgent, "Don't celebrate yet, Nick. Cain's team is desperate, and desperation breeds dangerous plays. We need to be prepared for anything." And indeed, anything arrived faster than expected. Before the judge could call a recess, Cain's lead attorney stood, voice sharp as a blade as he announced, "Your Honor, the defense would like to submit a motion for immediate dismissal based on the assertion that the so-called secret file was unlawfully obtained, taken from a private residence overseas without proper jurisdiction, without warrant, and under duress. We argue that this so-called evidence is inadmissible in an American court of law." Gasps echoed through the gallery, Jill clutched her pearls, Nicky whispered frantically to Victor, and the judge's gavel slammed for order. Nick's heart hammered in his chest, for he knew the lawyer wasn't wrong. He and Noah had retrieved the file in secret, breaking locks, trespassing into a French villa, taking the documents without any official sanction. And while morally justified, the legality of their mission was now a noose Cain's team hoped to tighten around their necks. The judge, stern and deliberate, announced he would review the motion during recess, leaving a tense silence that thickened the air like smoke. Outside the courthouse, chaos exploded. Reporters swarmed Nick and Noah, cameras flashing as questions were hurled like stones. "Mr. Newman, did you steal Catherine Chancellor's private files? Noah, are you being used as a pawn by your father? Cain, do you believe the Newman family planted false evidence to destroy you?" Cain himself, escorted by bodyguards, seized the opportunity to deliver a venomous statement to the press. "This is a witch hunt. Catherine loved me like a son, and now the Newmans are spitting on her memory by fabricating lies. That boy is confused, manipulated, brainwashed by a father desperate to look like a hero. But let me be clear, this so-called file is nothing but fiction, and I will prove it. When this is over, the world will see who the real criminals are." His words sliced into the crowd like knives, and though Nick clenched his fists, ready to strike back, Michael held him back, whispering, "Don't give him what he wants. He thrives on chaos. Stay calm. We'll fight him in the courtroom, not on the sidewalk." That night, at the Newman ranch, the family gathered in tense silence. Victor poured himself a drink, his voice booming with authority as he addressed them all. "We cannot rely on the courts alone. Cain is cornered, and a cornered man is the most dangerous kind. He will lash out, he will scheme, he will try to destroy us all. Nicholas, Noah, you must be vigilant. Do not underestimate him." Nicky, ever the voice of compassion, reached across the table to Noah, her hand warm and maternal as she whispered, "You were so brave today, sweetheart. Catherine would be proud of you. Don't let Cain's poison touch your heart." But Noah, staring into the crackling fire, admitted softly, "It already has." Every time I close my eyes, I see him standing there, coming for me.